Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into the GSMC Television Podcast. It's brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Howard Fletcher, and I am excited to be here with you this evening because I get to talk to you about my favorite, or one of my favorite shows of all time, Better Call Saul. The new season, which is season 5, started this week. AMC, which is the network that broadcasts the show, aired episode 1 this past Monday, February the 24th, and episode 2 aired on Tuesday the 25th. Now, something that I'm seeing more often on pay cable channels and basic cable channels is that they're airing their new series or the new season of a series with the first and second episode coming back to back, if not on the same night, with it, on consecutive days. We saw this most recently with HBO's The Outsider, which premiered in January, I believe, and they aired episode 1 and 2 on the same Sunday. This is because of those streaming services. Netflix started this, and you all can relate to it. When we see one of these new series, or a series, or a season of a series, and it starts off with episode 1 and we really like it, we want to just keep going to episode 2. Basic cable or even pay cable channels like HBO and Showtime or Epix, they can't afford to do this. They want viewers that are going to hang around for weeks or even months. So what they are doing now is instead of just giving you that episode 1 and hoping that you come back next week, they'll give you 1, or in some cases I've even seen 3 episodes at once or within days of each other so that you can whet your appetite, get invested, sink your teeth into it. Much like HBO's The Outsider, excuse the play on words, you'll want to come back, hang around, come back next week, and AMC has made that decision with this season of Better Call Saul, which I think is a good call. I haven't seen episode 2, I have seen episode 1, I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but there is so much happening in this new plot that I think, they want to get you up and running and let you digest 2 so that you're ready to go on for the rest of the season. Better Call Saul is a spin-off prequel of the landmark series Breaking Bad, for those of you who don't know. And the creator of Breaking Bad is Vince Gilligan, who I think is a television genius and innovator. I'd put him on my television, or recent television, Mount Rushmore, with Damon Lindelof, Sam Ismail, Noah Hawley, and David Chase. Yeah, I know that's 5 heads, but I'd chisel them in there. Anyway, I wanted to discuss this series on my first show, not only because the new season premiered, but because I think it's a fantastic example of the evolution and the renaissance of the small screen that we're experiencing right now. Especially in this time of exploding streaming services like The King, Netflix, Amazon Prime, CBS All Access, Disney Plus, BritBox, which is a British TV streaming service, ESPN Plus, which has special sporting events, but also it has its entire 30 for 30 documentary series catalog on there, which are really good. Shudder, which has a horror library, and there are just so many more. There are a whole lot of streaming services. But it shows like Better Call Saul that are broadcast on a basic cable network. And some shows like that we'll talk about later in the next segment that are a ray of hope for the Xfinities and the Fioses and DirecTVs of the world. That's what these providers need, because many of us are cutting the cord. I haven't done it yet, obviously because I'm a television junkie. That's why I'm doing this podcast. But, as long as content can come on those cable stations of this quality, people are more likely to stay on. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say that Better Call Saul is better than Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad was a groundbreaking television event. If you watched it in real time when it was on, everyone knows that people were hanging on, wanted to see the next one. That was a show that you wanted to binge, but you weren't able to binge. But it was content that kept you coming back, and every season got more and more compelling. But so I'm not saying it's better than Breaking Bad, but Better Call Saul is kind of like the Beatles music after Sgt. Pepper's, or the Beach Boys after Pet Sounds, or Miles Davis' stuff after Kinda Blue. See, after those albums, you learned to listen to the music of those artists differently. We as an audience, we were being shown a new way to listen to music. The rules of the game had somehow been altered, and we liked it because we loved the music. And that's exactly what Vince Gilligan did with Breaking Bad. And now that we know how to consume his product, now that we know his brand of storytelling, with Better Call Saul, he's more able to take his time. Some might say self-indulgently, but he's able to unfold this saga at its own pace, at his own pace. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Better Call Saul, as I said it before, it's a prequel. And prequels are not easy to pull off. You can ask George Lucas about that. Those 3 Star Wars prequels, and that was The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. Now, they're all about how Anakin Skywalker becomes Lord Darth Vader, which Darth Vader is one of the greatest villains ever to grace the screen. So that's compelling in itself. You want to know how in the world this guy got created, because everyone wanted him in every scene. He was the guy. This prequel is about Saul Goodman. Now, Saul Goodman, he's not, he was a great character. He was one that I really liked in Breaking Bad. I can't say he was even on my top 3 character list. Maybe just making the top 5. So I didn't anticipate wanting to follow Saul Goodman in a series. He's interesting, he was humorous, but he was not someone I was anxious to see like Darth Vader. If I've gotten a little burnt out on Star Wars movies, but if they made a Darth Vader movie now, I'd go see it. If there was a series that was the Darth Vader series, I'd watch it. So Better Call Saul, while I like Vince Gilligan's stuff, I had to see. I didn't know if I wanted to see it. See, Breaking Bad was about watching Walter White evolve or devolve into the notorious drug kingpin Heisenberg. And not only was it very detailed on how the meth business goes down, but that character was like the human Darth Vader, even though Anakin Skywalker is human, but he was like the contemporary Darth Vader. This was a bad dude, and it was TV that you really wanted to watch. Better Call Saul is about, okay, this is a spoiler warning. If you haven't watched the show, you may want to fast forward about 30 seconds to a minute. Better Call Saul is about watching slipping Jimmy McGill, which is Saul's real name, become Saul Goodman. Now Saul Goodman, he's a bad person who tries to be good. He's got a good heart. He does end up changing his name but all in all, he's essentially the same person all the way through. We get his backstory. We understand his motivations, but his character is pretty much the same guy. We kind of know what he's going to do, unlike Walter White, because this guy is who he is. So how in the world has Vince Gilligan and his writing team and his crew, the directors, how have they seemingly made a prequel and they just announced it's in its penultimate season, that rivals its predecessor, which is by many accounts, a lot of people think Breaking Bad is the greatest show in television history. Well, if I knew how they did that, I'd be producing television shows or at least writing them. I wouldn't be recording a podcast about them. But see, all I know is that in order for someone to pull that off is worth the watch. I have no problem recommending that people watch Breaking Bad, and even more surprisingly, I definitely have no problem saying watch Better Call Saul. And watch them in that order. It's a great binge, and you'll thank me afterwards. The show's last season, season 6, is supposed to be 13 episodes long, and it'll air sometime in 2021. Next, I want to talk about some other shows on basic cable, mostly AMC and USA, which are hoping to keep commercial cable alive in this world of growing streaming services. So kick back, I'll be back in a moment, and we'll talk about some new shows.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Welcome back. We were just talking about why Better Call Saul is such a transcendent television show. But the ominous fact for Better Call Saul and shows like it is that they currently air on basic cable, and for the entertainment industry, well, entertainment by way of cable, the future looks kind of bleak. The winds of change, they are a blowing for the cable TV industry. It's all happening a lot faster than anyone thought. Cord cutting, as it's called, has been setting new records. In fact, in 2019, just last year, 40.2 million American households reportedly canceled their cable contract. According to eMarketer, and that's a company that measures this type of stuff, they said that number of 40.2 million American households was a 19.2% increase from 2018. So under a best case scenario for the cable providers that are out there and the satellite providers, distribution is going to have to change to streaming services like DirecTV is trying to do, which is DirecTV Now, at the very least. The existing cable structure on its own, the way it is, it's complicated and it's expensive. Cable companies have to reserve a portion of their cable bandwidth just for television. That's it. Cable boxes have to be distributed to homeowners, and technicians have to run a physical wire. That's why it's called cable, everywhere you want to watch cable. So it's inflexible. You can stream anywhere you can get Wi-Fi. So I can watch, let's use Better Call Saul. If it was streaming on AMC, I could watch that in a Starbucks, or I could watch it in the comfort of my man cave at home. So introducing technologies like 4K or HDR or new sound codecs, it requires a lot of work for cable to adapt those things. And so it's not only is it expensive for the consumer, but for companies to be able to grow quickly and adapt to the advances in technology, it's just slow. It's just very hard for them to do. Now, I know what I just went through, those numbers, sounded like a bunch of gobbledygook, and it probably was. But the point that I want to make is that cable is losing customers. And until it gets its game together and is able to convert over to a more flexible system like streaming services, it's going to have to keep you on that teat. And the way they're going to have to do that is through programming. So they're relying on networks like USA, AMC, Lifetime, Bravo, those types in the E, to come up with programming, Hallmark, the stations that run commercials. They need them to come up with programming that will keep their customers in place until they can catch up to everybody else if they ever do. So what I wanted to talk about is some of those programs. I want to talk about these new shows. Some of them have already started, and I've seen some of them. Some of them are going to be out in the future. I'm going to tell you about them. And this is what they're shooting for. Now these shows that I've chosen out, they happen to be on AMC and USA. It just happens that the shows that I like on basic cable tend to be on those networks right now. So let's go through them. The first one is one that's running on USA right now. It's called Briar Patch. And, there are many things to love about Briar Patch. It's a new mystery crime anthology series. It's almost unfathomably, how do you say that word? Unfathomably stylish, thanks to the involvement of Sam Esmail, who is on my Mount Rushmore. He's the guy who brought us Mr. Robot, which, oh, by the way, is another groundbreaking show in my opinion. And he's the executive producer. And he also had a co-creator, a gentleman named Andy Greenwald. Andy Greenwald worked with Bill Simmons on Grantland and The Ringer, which are two websites that are pretty nice. You should go check them out. Why do I like this show? I like actors. I like character actors. And this show is full of those, hey, that's that actor who, the show, that guy. Yeah, that guy. Those faces are in this show. And it includes actors like Kim Dickens, who's from Fear the Walking Dead, a show that I didn't watch, but she was the star of it, and Sons of Anarchy, which was a show that I did watch. She plays the police chief. There's Jay Ferguson. He's a gentleman from Mad Men. Now he sports a beard. He sported a beard at the end of Mad Men. He was the love interest, I believe, of Elizabeth Moss, who you can currently see as the star of The Handmaid's Tale. She's also supposed to be in the Invisible Man movie. I don't have any high expectations for that production, but if anyone can make it good, I trust Elizabeth Moss. Anyway, back to Briar Patch. It also has in some bit roles Ed Asner, who I need not give you any of his credits. He's an icon. David Paymer and Alan Cummings. The show, though, is led by Rosario Dawson, who, it's about time that she gets to be the lead head honcho in her own show. She is an excellent actress. She plays a government agent of some type. They haven't told us yet. I've seen 3 episodes, and so far I like it a lot. Some reviews I've seen have said Briar Patch is a bit too slick for its own good, but I challenge anyone to watch it, because if you watch it, I'm sure you're going to want some more. Besides, it has Ed Asner. So, come on. There's another show called Dare Me. That's a USA show as well. Now, this is a show that I would normally not watch. So I got a review from this guy named Steve Green, who writes for IndieWire. He says that even before the blood starts flowing, Dare Me is a show dripping with the anxiety of potential danger. Its main characters are members and leaders of a high school cheerleading squad, and whenever they or one of their cohorts go flying through the air, a safe landing is never guaranteed. Watching these aerial maneuvers against the sea of psychological chaos is a contrast that not only gives this USA series its anxiety, but its artistry. It's the kind of slow churn vice grip you'd expect from a show based on Megan Abbott's novel of the same name, in which Addie Hanlon relates the circumstances surrounding a shocking event that rumbles the foundation of her Midwestern town. Like I said, this is something that I would normally not watch. However, the commercials and trailers run throughout Briar Patch, which I did watch. They didn't sway me, but it looked a little bit deeper than just a regular old teen thriller. And given the positive things that I've heard and I've read, I may give it a look in the future, but I have a lot of stuff on my backlog. One show I am going to give a little peek is one called Dispatches from Elsewhere. The show is going to be on AMC. It hasn't started yet. It starts on March 1st. So I looked around to see if any critics got a preview, and some did. One lady, Caroline Fromke from Variety, did, and in her review, I'll just read her little blurb about it. When they start noticing unusual twists on reality blooming all around them in otherwise unremarkable Philadelphia lives, leading to an elaborate scavenger hunt unlike anything they could have imagined, the main quartet of characters in Dispatches from Elsewhere thinks they've got it figured out. Now, I like this show, or how it looks, again, because of the actors they've put together. I think it's a pretty interesting crew. Actually the lead actress is a young lady named Eve Lindley. She's a relative newcomer. You're not going to find a Wikipedia page for her, and I like that. Some of the best new actor finds have come through cable television, especially in the last 15 years. Andre Benjamin is in it from the Andre 3000, Hey Outcast, and I think he's very charismatic. I think he's a good actor. He was in a questionable Jimi Hendrix movie, but I don't think that was his fault. I think it was the fault of the filmmaker. Sally Field is in it. She needs no endorsements from me. She's Sally Field. Also, the creator of the series is Jason Segel, who famously got naked in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. You know him because he's been in a lot of movies. I think he's a pretty creative guy. He wrote that movie, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and so I have high expectations for this. And finally, British actor Richard E. Grant is in it. You should look him up. You know him. He was in Gosford Park. He's been in a lot of British productions. I think he's a fantastic actor. And my last honorable mention news show is coming on AMC April 12th, Walking Dead World Beyond. I'm not a Walking Dead guy, but I live by don't hate the player, hate the game. And man, The Walking Dead is the zombie of franchises. It keeps going. I just give it its props. If you like The Walking Dead, you got another one coming. Next, I want to talk about some of these streaming services because some big news just came down about Disney, and I'll get into that right after this short break. I'll be right back. We're going to talk about the mouse.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. I spent the beginning of this show talking about the threat of streaming services to basic cable and how these services have exploded. I called Netflix the king, and I still believe it is the king because they started this whole thing. But another streaming service that came on just recently with great fanfare was Disney Plus. The streaming service launched the end of last year, November 12th to be exact, and afterward Disney's stock price went through the roof, and that was because they set a record of subscriptions. They signed up by November 18th, which is a short 6 days. Actually, it was probably 5 days because they made this announcement on the 18th. They said that they had 10 million subscribers. And they signed them actually in just a day, according to Disney. Now, so you can get an idea of just how big that was. HBO has 8 million subscribers lifetime since they've been doing this streaming thing, and it's been since 2010. So in 9 years, HBO was able to get 8 million subscribers. In one day, Disney was able to get 10 million subscribers. So that's, you can see why that was a big thing. And also, CBS All Access, Showtime has a streaming service, and Hulu, he put all of those together. They don't have as many subscribers combined as Disney Plus got in one day. That growth wasn't a total triumph because, as you can imagine, you sign up 10 million people in one day, which sets a record. Things are going to crash. That's just the nature of the internet right now. And so there were some disgruntled people at the very beginning, but as you can imagine, Disney has the money, Disney has the technology, they iron that out pretty quickly. And they, with the premiere of The Mandalorian, which is the Star Wars series, and the Marvel library that they have, and plus all the Disney movies, they had a pretty good foothold. They did. They do. So what was this big news that I wanted to talk about going into the break about streaming in Disney? It certainly wasn't this 10 million subscribers, because that's old news. No, the news I'm talking about happened last night, which was February 25th, was yesterday. And late yesterday, Disney made a surprise announcement that Bob Iger, who is the chairman and CEO of Disney, stepped down. He said that the successful launch of Disney's direct-to-consumer businesses is one of the reasons for the timing that he wanted to hand off being CEO, and he handed off to this guy, Bob Chapek. Now, true, this month, Disney reported tremendous growth for Disney Plus, which now has 28.6 million users from that 10 million I just talked about. And that's in just 3 months out of the gate. Also, Disney owns Hulu, which is a service that I have, and they own ESPN Plus. So they have a big footprint in the streaming industry. And so things were rolling, and people don't understand why Bob Iger, who I guess steered this ship in this direction, would step down after this home run. Usually this is when people want to take a victory lap. Maybe he's getting out. Maybe he knows something we don't know. At least that's what people are asking. Now, the streaming division is headed by Kevin Mayer, and some thought he was going to be the possible successor to Iger at the CEO seat, but apparently he wasn't. And there are signs that the streaming business, which is, like I said, it's a great success as far as getting subscribers, but it's actually just a work in progress. I mean, there are questions about how all these pieces are going to fit together, and how are they going to maintain this so that all of their 28 million plus consumers will enjoy the service and keep the subscription. Now, Mayer just installed a new boss at Hulu, and that's a lady named Kelly Campbell, and she was formerly the chief marketing officer. So I'm sure she's quite familiar with the workings over there, and I'm sure she'll do a great job. But she took the reins from this guy named Randy Freer, who just recently stepped down also, which was not something that was foreseen. So here you have the CEO of Hulu, a big part of the Disney streaming empire. And, they've installed a new CEO for Hulu, and now you have a new CEO for the whole Disney Corporation. Now, I don't want to get too much in the weeds about this and play musical corporate chairs. But I just wanted to bring all of this up because, over at Disney Plus, there's still some uncertainty about the direction of the service's content and its strategy. So while I did say that they were a big threat, and they are, and that they were, they signed up all these people, and a lot of people have cut the cord on cable. This thing is still, moving around. It's still trying to figure out what's going on. Now, Disney Plus is an interesting case study because, they scored big victories in the beginning because they have the whole Star Wars library over there. They came out with that series, The Mandalorian, which was a big hit, especially when it was released around the time of the Rise of Skywalker. And I think some people who were disappointed with that installment of the Star Wars series kind of got some relief from that disappointment from The Mandalorian. And so I think they benefited from that as well. There are also questions about how they're going to divvy up their content. Now, this is a good problem to have. But, there's some things because Disney Plus has the Disney name and and family comes along with Disney. There's certain content that Disney Plus just cannot run because it's too adult. But now they have Hulu, so they can shuttle that over to Hulu. So, you don't have to worry about, when you go on Disney Plus, necessarily putting in the adult controls. I think it's just going to be, normal Disney content over there, along with Marvel And, Marvel's coming out with some more movies, so you might have to put those on Hulu as well. But the biggest challenge to these streaming services, which Disney is going to have to confront, especially to keep such a large group of customers happy, to keep them around, is they are not really developing a lot of original content yet. See, and that's the key. That's where Netflix has really, and Amazon too, but that's where Netflix really took the lead and understood what they were getting into. Because the only way people are going to continually tune in, stream in, to what you have is if they think they can get something new, or there is something new there that they want to see. Because there's only so many times that you can watch Bambi, only so many times that you can watch The Empire Strikes Back. Although I have some friends who would challenge that although I have some friends that would challenge that that's a finite number. You still have to be able to develop some new content. And apparently that wasn't happening or hasn't been happening in Disney Plus other than The Mandalorian, which was a smashing success. So maybe the CEO, Iger, did what so few people know how to do, is to quit while they're ahead. Maybe he took Disney where he wanted it to go. Disney is on the top of the heap right now as far as subscribers and stock price. So this is a good time to exit. But for the people that are taking over, it's a very challenging time because there is a lot of competition out there. You have Netflix and Amazon that I mentioned that have developed original content that is, they're winning Oscars now, Netflix. And so in the next segment, that's really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Netflix and how it has gone from original content that was watchable to original content that started winning Golden Globes, like House of Cards, but they were TV shows, to producing movies that are given Oscar consideration, and not only Oscar consideration, that are actually winning the statuette. So, kick back. We're going to pay some bills, and I'll be back to talk about the king of all streaming services, Netflix, and their quality programming. Until then, may the force be with you.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Last segment, I was talking about streaming services, particularly Disney Plus, which started with great success and still is, by all measures, successful. But they're facing one of the big challenges that streaming services, if they want to stay competitive and stay in the game, face, and that's developing original content. I think Netflix has done this the best. I'll get into some reasons why some other analysts might say not, or maybe not in the way they've gone about doing it financially. But in order to get subscribers to stay on, you not only have to get the best movies that are coming from the theaters, but you have to be able to get the best television shows, the syndicated ones, the ones that people want to see again and again on demand, like Law and Order, and things like that. But you do need original content in order to stay in the game. And Netflix recognized that, and they recognized that early. They've been always quick to change. I was an original Netflix subscriber. I thought it was a great idea to do this mail order on the internet DVD thing, even though I lived right across the street from a Blockbuster, and I really liked it because they had a great variety of movies. And it turns out I wasn't the only one who liked it. Everyone liked it, and Blockbuster went out of business. And Netflix, because they seemed to be pretty savvy, they knew that they were going to have to change because the DVD was going to go away, just like the VHS tape went away that they destroyed. And so they started streaming in 2007, I believe. And after that, they realized they had to develop original content. So they came out with House of Cards in February of 2013. And House of Cards, I'm sure everyone listening probably has seen at least one episode of that, if not all of that. It was a great show. It probably might still be on the air now if it weren't for some of the trouble that Kevin Spacey found himself in. That same year, they came out with another show called Hemlock Grove, which was a horror thriller show. Didn't do as well, only 3 seasons. But later that same year, in July, they came out with Orange is the New Black, which I believe is currently in its last season. Or next season will be its last season. And I believe that's going to be starting in July. And that shows how much staying power those shows have. They expanded into comedies in 2015, like The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt and Grace and Frankie with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. They got into some docuseries. In the same year, they did Chef's Table and the very popular Making a Murderer. They did some continuations, which was very innovative. Shows that had been canceled on network, they adapted. So they had 2 seasons of Arrested Development on, which came from the Fox network. Also, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, the animated series, they ran, that was on Cartoon Network. It was canceled from Cartoon Network, and Netflix ran the season 6 of it. They had one of my favorite series that was canceled from AMC, which we talked about early on, The Killing. They did the last season, which was season 4. They did that in 2014. And also, they started developing original movies, the first 2 of which were movies that, The Beasts of No Nation, which was a very intense movie with Idris Elba. I believe he was nominated for a Golden Globe for that role. And The Ridiculous Six, which was a Western comedy, which I didn't watch, or I haven't watched yet. But these were their 2 first efforts. And the reception for this original content was so positive, and they picked up more subscribers who wanted to get to this content by being a subscriber. They decided to go all in on original content. And as a result, they are the king of streaming. At least they were before Disney Plus. I think they're going to have a better time staying stable than Disney Plus, unless Disney Plus develops that original content like we were talking about. Now, developing original content isn't without its risks. I mean, Netflix, the stock dropped 11% back in July because it reported its lowest quarterly subscriber growth in 3 years. And it was the first domestic subscriber loss since 2011. Some of those numbers are because of the people knew that Disney Plus was coming out and some other streaming services. So some people who were on a limited budget decided to pull out of Netflix and in anticipation of Disney Plus. Also, one of the things that affected the bottom line is that Netflix spent, now listen to this number, they spent $13 billion on content in 2019. And that's an 85% increase from previous years. So with that much money invested, you're going to probably expect, especially in the first year, some shrinking of your bottom line. And that's exactly what they experienced. Now, I don't think they predicted the percentage of market share that Disney Plus was going to eat up. And they are going to have to be able to compete with them on the subscriber home front. Nevertheless, their investment in original content has paid off as far as the reception it's gotten from the audience and the accolades that they've received from the arts community. And that might have a great effect on the types of artists or the quality of artists that Netflix can attract to its studios in their production company in order to make this original content. Now let me show you just what that investment has done for Netflix. In 2019, Netflix got its first Oscar nomination for Best Picture. And that was for Roma. A year later, this year in 2020, Netflix earned 24 nominations and it doubled its all-time total. Now they had multiple nominations other years in different categories, different acting categories and production categories like sound. But this year they were the studio that received the most nominations overall. 2 pictures were nominated for Best Picture, and that was Martin Scorsese's The Irishman and Marriage Story. Marriage Story received 6 nominations, and The Irishman got the most nominations of any movie in the field with 10. Ironically, in the number 2 spot is good old Disney Studios. They got 22 nominations. Now this was a big change for Hollywood because early on when Netflix started receiving nominations, some of the old guard was kind of against it because they feared that the small screen was going to take over the big screen. They didn't want Netflix productions to start taking some of the spotlight off of movies that are shown in theaters. I think the thoughts have changed on that. They're changing. You know, now Martin Scorsese did release The Irishman in theaters at first, and it was a limited release, and then eventually it got onto Netflix. If you watch The Irishman and you saw how long it is, it could have been a Netflix series, actually. So it was probably better to watch that on Netflix, if you ask me. However, movies like Marriage Stories and others were well received on Netflix, and it was apparent by the nominations that they were able to get. So, I don't think Netflix is going anywhere as far as the original content is concerned. The list, if you go to Wikipedia and you look at the list of original productions from Netflix since 2013, you're going to get a list of, I don't know how long it is, but it's hundreds of productions, and that includes, international movies. They do a lot of team-ups with Canal Studios and the BBC, and that's one of the reasons why I originally liked Netflix from the beginning, because of their international films and the way that they are able to partner with all of these different production companies from different places. So is this a love letter to Netflix? Not exactly. There are times that I'm there with my partner Joan and we're surfing Netflix trying to find a show or a movie to watch, and we can't find one, just like when we're using the remote control to go up and down the cable guide and surf through a bunch of channels that we never watch and we can't find anything either. However, I do admire how Netflix has the breadth of their offerings and how their original content is really good and how they are just upping the quality of it every year and they're investing in it. And I appreciate that. But next, I want to talk about an HBO show that was adapted from a graphic novel that's very close to my heart. It's called Watchmen. So sit back and relax, and I'll be back as quickly as Dr. Manhattan transporting himself through the intrinsic field. See you soon.
Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
We were just talking about original content and streaming services, and HBO really kind of pioneered. I just talked about Netflix pioneering something, but HBO did. They pioneered the adult original content. series, starting with probably Oz, or The Corner. It was, those are monumental shows, and we'll talk about them more later. But I wanted to talk about a show that premiered last October, and this is not news, HBO's Watchmen, which is an adaptation sequel of the classic graphic novel that was written by Alan Moore and it was illustrated by Dave Gibbons. Now, in my opinion, and in the opinion of millions of other people, Watchmen is the greatest graphic novel ever written. It was released at the end of 1986, going into 87. In 86, it was originally released as a 10-issue single, comic book series. After the 10th issue, it was released again as a bound together graphic novel. And it was a tremendous hit. So when HBO announced that they were going to be making this adaptation sequel, using these characters from this most sacred text, there was an outcry. People were I was skeptical. I didn't have an outcry. I wanted to see it. But, a lot of hardcore Watchmen fans were dead against this. And one of the reasons is because, there have been some other things that have been made based on this book. One was the movie by Zack Snyder, that was made in 2010 that was, panned by Alan Moore, the writer, which wasn't a surprise. Alan Moore pans anything that has to do with his work that he has no control over. So he panned the movie, but the movie visually was spectacular, but Zack Snyder changed the story. Why they do that in movies, you got me, but it was not good. So, and DC released a prequel series of comic books called Before Watchmen that told the origin stories of people that are characters in the book, the Minutemen and some others. And that was panned by some readers and definitely panned by Alan Moore. So last October, HBO premiered Watchmen, which was this sequel 9-episode miniseries, which was created by Damon Lindelof, one of my heads on my Mount Rushmore. You probably see a pattern forming. Now, Damon Lindelof is the creative mind behind Lost, a series that I have never watched, and The Leftovers. Now, the only thing that I know about Lost, besides its huge popularity, and some people still love it, was that Lost ended in a way that was very controversial. I haven't asked about the details of that because I do plan to watch it one day, but I know that the fan base really thought it sucked. So that's why I felt very dubious about this one, about this Watchmen thing. Now, The Leftovers, really good. And The Leftovers was an HBO production. So that really was encouraging to me. I'm in love with these characters, so I would have watched this thing, even if, it was made by the people who brought you Jackass. I would still have watched the series, but I was happy to see Lindelof at the helm. All of that said, I'm here to tell you that HBO's Watchmen is tremendous television. It was the best show that was produced in 2019, in my opinion. Damon Lindelof took a lot of risks, and I know some of them people are my friends. I know people who did not like this series because it wasn't what they expected. However, given the source material, I don't think that you could have taken this series many other directions that would mesh as well with the characters that are in that graphic novel. Now, something that Lindelof and the showrunners did was they started this series off in a way that within the first 10 minutes, you'll know whether you want to sit there and watch the rest of it or not. It's not a straight adaptation of the graphic novel, and Lindelof will tell you that. The show is set in 2019. The graphic novel Watchmen is set in 1985, I believe. Maybe 86, but in the 80s. In the opening 10 minutes of this show, he depicts the Tulsa race massacre of 1921. Now, this is not a spoiler because it's a historic event, but the massacre was pure malevolence. It was when white citizens of Tulsa, Oklahoma, destroyed Black Wall Street, and hundreds of people were killed. And they're not quite sure what the number is, but it was over 200. Most estimates today put it at about 300 dead. We do know that it was the largest and worst incidence of racial violence in American history. So why would he start this series off, a superhero show, with that? Well, there's a reason, and it works within the story. And much like the graphic novel, which dealt with nuclear war, I mean, that was the Cold War, and nuclear war really was the running theme of that graphic novel. It made the reader look at the Cold War, but also look at the superhero, and if what would be the implications of Supermen and vigilantes if they really were around in society. How would society deal with that? And what kind of pressures would the existence of a Superman have when we have countries that have nuclear weapons at the same time? It was pretty deep stuff. And what Damon Lindelof did is he took that theme, updated it, mixed up some other ingredients in it, and I think he did a darn good job of pulling it off. It was a little bit too political for some viewers. I understand that. It's not everybody's cup of tea. But that's what the book Watchmen was about, politics. And I think he did a good job. But why I would recommend it is, my warning would be, it has to do with politics and race. If you don't like those subjects, don't watch it. But if you like good acting, watch this series, because it has Regina King in a fantastic performance as a character named Angela Abar. Don Johnson has a supporting role. He's excellent. Tim Blake Nelson, he's excellent. Yahya Abdul-Mateen, he's fantastic. Now, that's not a household name yet. He played Black Manta in Aquaman, which still probably won't make him a household name, but he was good in Aquaman. He was fantastic in this. Louis Gossett Jr. makes an appearance, and Jeremy Irons and Gene Smart. All of those people need to be lauded and congratulated for the performances they put on, because this was a series that not only did the actors really have to get in character, but the story is about humanity and relationships. It's not about superpowers and vigilantism. So it takes great writing, decent direction, but spectacular actors in order to pull that off. And that's what we have here. So I liked it. And that's why Damon Lindelof has a head up on my Mount Rushmore for The Leftovers, which was a very daring, risky series that he pulled off, and for doing this Watchmen thing. Some people were calling for a second season. He has announced that this is it, that those 9 episodes are it. I am disappointed because I do like the characters and I did like the series, but I totally understand it because, much like my man Iger, who just stepped down as the CEO of Disney, I think Damon knows when to put something down. And this is probably the best time to put Watchmen down. So next, I'm going to leave you with my top 10 shows of all time today. Because this list changes it can change by the time this day is over. I might change it. But at this moment, I'm going to give you my top 10 shows, whether it's from network television or pay TV, streaming, whatever. If it goes on a little screen, it'll be in this list. I'll be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We're back. I just finished talking about why I think HBO's Watchmen is a great series. I highly recommend it. And you should watch it. And I would recommend watching at least 2 episodes. Don't let the beginning of it disturb. It's a disturbing beginning. Don't let that be the reason why you don't watch the whole series. Watch it. Okay, it's a top 10 list of my all-time favorite television shows, regardless of genre, regardless of how I watched it, whether it came from old school antenna television or from cable television, or from pay channels on cable television, or it came from streaming services. And since I only had 10 slots, I did a little honorable mention section, and hope that's not cheating, but it's my list, so it's not a cheat. And my 3 honorable, and I put only 3 in it, and my 3 honorable mention shows are, not surprising, Better Call Saul, Watchmen, and Mr. Robot, which is Sam Esmail's show that just finished its run. It's another series that I highly recommend. You should go watch. If nothing else, it'll teach you that no matter how much antivirus software you put on your computer, if somebody wants to hack your computer, it'll be hacked. Okay, number 10. It's a show that introduced me and most of America to John Hamm and Elizabeth Moss. Mad Men. Mad Men was the show that reminded us that we used to smoke in offices and planes. We used to line them up in elevators, and just how good Coca-Cola commercials used to be and the way they used to make us feel. It was a good show. Number 9 is The Twilight Zone, which is Rod Serling's classic anthology series. Everyone has seen The Twilight Zone. I'm a fan of the original Twilight Zone, the old black and whites, which are on Netflix right now. Rod Serling let us know that dolls can be creepy. William Shatner is probably not the best person to sit next to on a plane, and that watch out for aliens that come bearing cookbooks. Number 8 is All in the Family. That's Norman Lear's flagship sitcom. The Jeffersons, Good Times, Sanford and Son, all of that came from the mind of Norman Lear, and most of those shows, Maude, they spun off of All in the Family. I don't know if the humor ages as well in this PC world we live in now, but it was a funny show. Number 7, Star Trek. The original Star Trek had the best crew ever assembled, and it conditioned the audience to know who was not going to make it back to the ship by putting red shirts on them, and I appreciated that. William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, it was just a great show. And I was never a Next Generation guy, and I didn't watch the other iterations of the show. I will always have a warm, soft place in my heart for the original Star Trek. Number 6, The Leftovers. I talked about the Leftovers in the last segment. And that's Damon Lindelof's series about what would happen if a rapture type occurrence happened. It's an HBO show. It was, people ask me, what is it about? And other than what I just told you, it's really hard to say. You have to watch the show. My other description is like, it's strangely kind of like Lord of the Flies with running water. You just gotta watch the show. It's some plots, it's one of those shows where some plots go places and some don't, but in a weird way, it all comes together at the end, and I think it's probably much more satisfying than what the people who watch Lost endured. I will watch Lost. I promise you. I'll watch Lost. Number 5, Game of Thrones. Okay, now this is a show. Game of Thrones is a show that I never would have watched based on the description of the plot. If you told me, or if I'd read what this show was about, I would say, this is a Lord of the Rings show. I'm not watching it because I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of that Dungeons and Dragons fantasy stuff. But I would have been very, very wrong. Game of Thrones is a well-written, unbelievably produced. I mean, it was like watching a big budget movie every night that it was on. It's some of the best. It had some of the best, scenes that I don't even like. Like, when I go in the movies, I'm not a big fan of like the big fight in the field with swords and horses and that type of thing. But the way Game of Thrones did it, it was exciting. It was really good. So again, I highly recommend Game of Thrones. I recommended it to people that were quite skeptical of it, like my sister, who became a fan. And, I'm not saying it's everyone's cup of tea. No show is everyone's cup of tea. But Game of Thrones has a little something for everybody. Now, if you're a person who can't tolerate graphic violence, sex, and nudity, then it's probably not the show for you. But if you can endure it, you should watch it. It's a good show. Number 4 is the Carol Burnett Show. Now, I will always love this show because in watching the show, this is one of the shows we used to sit around as a family and watch. And it was one of the first times that I can remember that I witnessed my mother laughing until she cried. That was an excellent ensemble variety show cast. And Carol Burnett would usually have the same little rotation of guest stars that would show up every season. And they were almost like a part of the ensemble cast. And they were really good. Harvey Korman is unreplaceable. In my mind, he is the original not ready for primetime player. I would have loved to see Harvey Korman host Saturday Night Live. Unfortunately, it's something we'll never see, but that's the one I would have wanted to see. Number 3, Breaking Bad. Now, given what I've talked about on this podcast, I really don't need to say much more about this. Vince Gilligan, I think, is a genius. It was a fantastic show. It's number 3 on my list, so I'm not one of the best shows of all time, guys. However, it's in the conversation, definitely, and Walter White is one of the greatest characters ever written for television. Ever. Number 2, The Sopranos. Now, Tony Soprano is another one of the greatest characters ever written for television. And it's another example of a cable series that allowed us to see the greatness of some actors that we probably would not have been able to see had they not had that platform, had that stage to be on. And that's James Gandolfini and Edie Falco. They are exceptional actors. And what The Sopranos, because of the popularity of the show, and a lot of that had to do with their acting skills, allowed them to be seen as really good actors. And Edie Falco has gone on to have a fantastic career. Unfortunately, James Gandolfini left us too early, but it would have been great to see him more. And number 1, no drum to roll, The Wire. David Simon's masterpiece about the city of Baltimore is the greatest show that's ever been on television, in my opinion. It was the first time that I realized that British actors can do American accents much better than American actors can do British accents. But that's not the only reason why I like the show. The show was written great. I am from Maryland. I grew up outside the DC area, but I'm very familiar with Baltimore. They got the accents correct. They got the neighborhoods correct. They got everything right in The Wire. I'm going to leave you one more Mount Rushmore. This one has 4 heads. This is the anti-hero television Mount Rushmore. Walter White, Tony Soprano, Stringer Bell, and Omar. And that's it. That is my top 10 list of the greatest television shows of all time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about television. I hope to do so in the future. If you'd like to share your top 10 list with me, please look in the show notes for my email address. Send it to me. I'd love to discuss it with you. I will read some different shows on the air next time that aren't on my list because, like I said, my list can change at any time and you may change my mind. So this has been the GSMC Television Podcast. It's been brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that all of you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review because that really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we would really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic night. And remember, a man gotta have a code.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.